She speaks to beasts. She is cursed. Of all the things they called me, that word cut the deepest. You knew what I was, and still you made me believe. Tell me, brother, does your pride hurt more than your heart? I could not allow her to be cast aside. She had never been chosen by anyone. The prince abandoned her before the entire kingdom. What no one expected was that the Alpha King's wolf would step forward and choose her himself. The stench of fear hung in the morning air long before the first sword was drawn. Illyra felt it rising from the soldiers around her, that sharp, bitter scent most humans could not detect. But she was not most humans. She had never been. She twisted beneath a strike meant to take her head, her blade whistling upward in a counter that caught her opponent across the ribs. The guard stumbled backward, shock bleeding through his expression as he clutched his side. "Yield," Illyra said quietly. He did not answer. Instead, he charged again, fueled by the laughter of the men watching from the edges of the training grounds. She sidestepped, swept his legs, and pressed her sword to his throat before his back even hit the dirt. Silence fell over the yard. The beast speaker has claws after all. A feminine voice shattered the quiet, dripping with amusement. A pity clause cannot mask what you truly are. Illyra did not need to look. She knew that voice the way she knew the scars hidden beneath her sleeves. Lady Odessa descended the stone steps with 3 girls trailing behind her like perfumed shadows. Her golden hair caught the early light, and her smile was the kind that preceded cruelty. 23 summers now, is it not? Odessa stopped at the edge of the training circle, tilting her head as though examining something unpleasant. 23 years of speaking to rats and crows while the rest of us speak to people. Tell me, Illyra, do the animals answer because they pity you, or because nothing else will? The fallen guard scrambled away, forgotten. Everyone always scrambled when Odessa decided to play. Illyra sheathed her sword slowly, buying herself time to cage the anger climbing her throat. The animals answer, she said evenly, because unlike some, they recognize honesty when they hear it. Odessa's smile flickered, a crack in the porcelain. Honesty. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Is that what you call your curse? The healers whispered about you when you were a child, you know. They said your mother must have lain with something wicked to produce a daughter who hears beasts inside her skull. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. Illyra's jaw tightened, but she held her ground. She had learned years ago that flinching only invited deeper wounds. Tears were trophies. Trembling was victory. My blade does not care what the healers whispered, Illyra replied, and neither do I. She turned and walked away before the fury building in her chest could escape. The laughter followed her across the training yard, sharp and mocking, but she did not look back. The corridors of Valdros Keep were cold at this hour, empty stone passages that amplified every footstep into an accusation. Illyra moved through them quickly, her thoughts louder than the echoes. Cursed, marked, beast speaker. She had heard every name imaginable, had endured every whisper, every sidelong glance, and every mother pulling her child closer when Illyra passed. In the kingdom of Valdros, where wolves walked alongside their bonded humans and the connection between shifter and beast was sacred, Illyra's gift was an abomination. She did not bond with wolves. She spoke to all beasts, every creature with fur or feather or scale. They came to her in dreams. They whispered to her in waking hours. They told her secrets no human was meant to know. And for that, she had been feared since childhood. Illyra stopped beside a narrow window overlooking the eastern towers. She needed air, needed silence, needed one moment where she was not performing strength she did not feel. Her eyes drifted across the rooftops, and then upward, to the highest balcony of the king's tower. A figure stood there. Dark hair, darker eyes, a stillness that seemed to swallow the light around him. King Sorin. He was watching her. Illyra's pulse quickened. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze pressing against her skin like a physical thing. It was not the first time. She had noticed him before. In moments she thought no one was paying attention. At the edge of the training grounds, in the shadows of the great hall. Always watching. Never approaching. Why? The question burned, but she forced herself to look away. She had no time for riddles. Not when her own survival demanded every ounce of focus she possessed. But as she walked deeper into the keep, she could still feel it. His gaze, following her like a beast tracking wounded prey. There was only one person in Valdros Keep who had ever made Illyra feel human. Prince Theron found her in the stables that afternoon, as he often did when he wanted to escape the suffocating rituals of court. His copper hair was windswept, his tunic unlaced at the collar, and his grin carried the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no. "You defeated Garrison this morning," he said, leaning against the stall door where Illyra was brushing down a gray mare. "3 times, I heard. The soldiers are calling you a demon." "Let them." Theron laughed, and the sound wrapped around her like something warm. "There she is, my fearless beast speaker." That single word had sustained Illyra for 8 years. She remembered the first time she saw him. She had been 15, bleeding in the dirt after a training session gone wrong, her ears still ringing with the instructor's shouted insults about her unnatural abilities. Theron had appeared from nowhere, golden in the afternoon light, untouchable. He had crouched beside her and offered his hand. "They say you speak to animals," he had said, curiosity bright in his green eyes. "Is it true?" Illyra had braced for mockery, for disgust. Instead, Theron had smiled. "That is extraordinary." No one had ever called her extraordinary before. The word had cracked something open inside her, something that had never fully closed since. For 8 years, she had trained beside him, laughed with him, sat with him in moonlit gardens while he spoke of his dreams, and she listened as though each word were precious. He never promised her anything. That was the elegant cruelty of it. He never spoke words that could be held against him. Only glances that lingered too long. Only fingers that brushed hers when passing a goblet of wine. Only whispers meant for her ears alone in crowded rooms. "You understand me, Illyra, not like the others." She had gathered these fragments like a starving woman gathers crumbs, convincing herself they would eventually become a meal. Now, in the dim warmth of the stables, Theron moved closer. His hand found her elbow, turning her gently to face him. "The bonding moon is in 2 weeks," he said. Illyra's stomach tightened. The bonding moon. The sacred night when wolves chose their mates, when bonds were declared before the kingdom, when futures were sealed. "I know," she managed. "I have been thinking." Theron's voice dropped lower, intimate. "About what I want. About who I want." The air between them grew heavy. "Theron. You have been patient with me, Illyra. More patient than I deserved." His thumb traced a circle on her arm, feather-light. "I see you. I have always seen you." Hope, that wretched creature she could never fully kill, clawed its way up her throat. "What are you saying?" Theron smiled, the same smile that had undone her at 15. "I am saying wait for me. At the ceremony. Everything will change." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft and lingering, then slipped out of the stables before she could respond. Illyra stood frozen in the hay-scented darkness, her pulse roaring in her ears. Everything will change. She wanted to believe him, desperately, dangerously. But somewhere beneath the hope, in a place she refused to examine, a small voice whispered a warning. "Theron disappears. He always disappears. And he always comes back expecting you to still be waiting." She silenced it. 2 weeks. She only had to hold on for 2 more weeks. King Soren did not sleep. He stood at the window of his private chambers, watching the moon carve silver paths across the castle grounds, and thought about the woman in the stables. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless in a way it had not been for years. The beast had been agitated for months now, prowling at the edges of Soren's consciousness, fixating on something Soren refused to name. Her. The beast speaker. The cursed girl the court whispered about with fear and fascination. Soren had watched her for longer than he cared to admit. Had noticed her the first time she knocked a soldier twice her size into the dirt and stood over him without a shred of triumph. Only exhaustion. He had seen her bandage a wounded hawk in the gardens when she thought no one was looking. Had observed the way she spoke to the kitchen cats, her voice soft and strange, as though she were having a real conversation. His wolf had noticed too. Mine, the beast growled whenever she was near. Ours. Soren clenched his jaw and pushed the thought down. She was nobody. A soldier of no rank, a woman the entire kingdom considered cursed. And she looked at his brother as though Theron hung the stars in the sky. It was not his place to interfere. And yet, he had heard Theron's words in the stables, had seen the hope bloom across her face like dawn breaking, and he had wanted to stride down there and shake her, warn her, tell her that his brother collected hearts the way others collected coins and discarded them just as easily. But what right did a king have to speak of such things? Soren turned from the window, his hands clasped behind his back. His wolf snarled in protest. 2 weeks, Soren told the beast. We wait. We watch. And if Theron breaks her? Soren had no answer. Only the growing certainty that whatever was coming would change everything. The great hall blazed with firelight and revelry. Illyra stood near the back, half hidden behind a pillar, watching the nobility swirl across the polished floor in silks and velvets she could never afford. The celebration marked the return of the King's War Council from the eastern borders, a victory that had secured another year of peace. She did not belong here, but Theron had insisted. Stay where I can find you, he had whispered earlier, his breath warm against her ear. Tonight is important. So she stayed, pressed against cold stone, clutching a goblet of wine she had not touched, trying to ignore the glances that slid over her like oil. The beast speaker. Here. How desperate. She heard the whispers. She always heard them. On the raised dais at the far end of the hall, King Soren sat motionless on his throne. He wore black, as he always did, the color swallowing light rather than reflecting it. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes moved constantly, cataloging every guest, every interaction, and every threat. When those eyes found Illyra, she felt it like a blade pressed to her throat. She looked away first. A ripple of movement near the center of the hall drew her attention. Theron had climbed onto the raised platform where musicians had been playing moments before, his copper hair catching the firelight, his grin wide and reckless. Illyra's stomach dropped. No, not here, not like this. My friends, Theron's voice rang out, silencing the crowd. I have an announcement. The whispers began immediately, a rising tide of speculation that crashed against Illyra from every direction. Theron raised his goblet. At the bonding moon ceremony, I will claim Illyra of the Grey Tower as my bonded mate. The silence that followed was absolute. Then it shattered. Gasps, murmurs, a few barely concealed laughs. Illyra felt the blood drain from her face as hundreds of eyes turned toward her, some shocked, some curious, most openly hostile. The beast speaker? The cursed one? Has the prince lost his mind? Theron descended from the platform and walked toward her through the parting crowd. His smile was triumphant, satisfied, as though he had given her a gift beyond measure. Surprise, he said softly, reaching for her hand. Illyra could not speak, could not move. Hope and terror warred inside her chest, each fighting for dominance. He chose me, After everything, he chose me. But the joy she expected did not come. Instead, there was only a strange numbness, a sense of standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling the ground begin to crumble. Her eyes, acting on instinct, drifted to the throne. Soren had not moved. His expression remained carved from stone. But something in his gaze, something dark and troubled, made Illyra's skin prickle. It was not approval. It was not indifference. It looked almost like warning. Lady Revena Voss arrived 3 days after the announcement. Illyra first saw her from the training grounds, pausing mid-strike as a gilded carriage rolled through the main gates. The horses were midnight black, their manes braided with silver thread. The woman who emerged was crafted from the same darkness. Revena's hair fell in obsidian waves past her waist. Her gown, deep crimson, clung to her figure like a second skin. And her eyes, pale as winter frost, swept across the courtyard with the precision of a predator selecting prey. When those eyes found Illyra, they lingered and smiled. "Lady Revena Voss," said a quiet voice beside her. "Daughter of Duke Voss, ruler of the Ashlands." Illyra turned to find a slight woman with mousy brown hair and spectacles perched on her nose. She did not recognize her. "Forgive me," the woman continued. "I am Mira, third cousin to someone important enough to grant me entry, invisible enough that no one remembers my face." She adjusted her spectacles. "I collect information. It is what invisible people do." "Why are you telling me this?" Mira's gaze followed Revena as servants rushed to attend her. "Because Lady Revena has destroyed 4 betrothals in the Ashlands alone. She came to Valdros seeking the king." A pause. "But I suspect she has found a more entertaining target." Illyra's jaw tightened. Theron announced his claim publicly. It cannot be undone. Claims can be withdrawn. Mira's voice held no malice, only the flat delivery of fact. And princes are notoriously fickle when presented with shinier alternatives. Before Illyra could respond, Mira had already melted back into the shadows, leaving only unease in her wake. The following days confirmed every warning. Revena was everywhere. In the gardens when Illyra walked to training, at meals, seated beside Theron with an intimacy that should not have existed after mere days. In the corridors, her laughter echoing like poison poured into crystal. She never attacked Illyra directly. She was far too clever for that. Instead, she wielded kindness like a weapon. "What a unique gift you possess," Revena said one morning, cornering Illyra near the stables. "Speaking to animals. How lonely it must be, understanding creatures that cannot truly understand you back." The words were wrapped in silk, but the blade beneath them drew blood. "I manage," Illyra replied. "Of course you do." Revena's smile widened. "Survivors always do. Tell me, does Prince Theron know how the court speaks of you? Does he understand what claiming you would cost his reputation?" Illyra's hands curled into fists. "Theron chose me." "Did he?" Revena tilted her head, a gesture of mock sympathy. "Or did he simply choose the path of least resistance until something better appeared?" She glided away before Illyra could answer, leaving the question to fester like an untreated wound. That night, Illyra watched from across the great hall as Theron laughed at something Revena whispered in his ear. His hand rested on the small of Revena's back. His eyes never once searched the crowd for Illyra. "He is slipping away." The thought came unbidden, and she crushed it immediately. 1 week. She only had to survive 1 more week. But when she glanced toward the throne, she found Soren's gaze already fixed on her. Not on Revena. Not on his brother. Her. And the intensity in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. Illyra found refuge in the eastern kennels, where the castle's hunting hounds were kept. The beasts knew her, trusted her. When she entered, a dozen heads lifted, tails beginning to wag, soft whines of greeting filling the air. She knelt among them, letting their warmth surround her, their simple emotions washing over her like clean water. Safe, friend, safe. Their thoughts brushed against hers, uncomplicated and honest. You should not be here alone. Elira shot to her feet, scattering hounds in her haste. She turned to find King Soren standing in the kennel doorway, his broad frame blocking the fading daylight. He wore riding leathers, his dark hair windswept, as though he had just returned from the forest. Your Majesty, she bowed quickly. I did not hear you approach. Few do. He stepped inside, and the hounds that had been so animated moments before fell silent. Not in fear, Elira realized. In deference. They lowered their heads, their thoughts shifting to something older, deeper. Alpha, King, bow. Soren stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. You are troubled, he said. It was not a question. I am fine. You are lying. Elira stiffened. With respect, Your Majesty, my troubles are my own. Soren studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. My brother makes promises easily. It is his nature, but keeping them requires a steadiness he has never possessed. The words struck like arrows finding their mark. Theron chose me, Elira said, hating how defensive she sounded. Theron chose the excitement of choosing you. Soren's gaze did not waver. There is a difference. Elira felt heat rise up her neck, equal parts anger and something she refused to examine. Why are you telling me this? Soren was silent for a breath. 2. Because I have watched you longer than you know, he said quietly. I have seen you rise from every fall, endure every cruelty, fight when others would have surrendered. You deserve certainty, Elira. Not a man who requires wine and an audience to speak his heart. The air between them shifted, charged with a tension that made Elira's skin tingle. You do not know me, she whispered. I know enough. His hand lifted, and for one impossible moment she thought he might touch her. Her breath hitched, her body leaned forward without permission. Then Soren stepped back, the mask of the distant king sliding into place. Consider my words, he said. That is all I ask. He turned and walked out of the kennels, leaving Elira surrounded by silent hounds and the ghost of something that felt dangerously like longing. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself. He is wrong. Theron loves me. He announced it before everyone. But as she stood there in the fading light, she could not stop hearing Soren's voice. You deserve certainty. And she could not stop wondering why those words, spoken by a king who barely knew her, felt more honest than anything Theron had ever said. The night of the bonding moon arrived wrapped in silver light and ancient magic. Elira stood at the edge of the sacred grove, her pulse thundering in her ears. The clearing was filled with nobles, elders, and warriors, all gathered beneath the luminous moon to witness bonds that would shape the kingdom's future. Torches flickered between ancient oaks. The ceremonial stones, carved with runes older than memory, pulsed with a faint inner glow. And at the center of the circle, the elder keeper waited, his white robes ghostly in the moonlight. Elira had dressed carefully, a gown of deep blue borrowed from Mira, who had appeared at her door that afternoon with the dress and a look of quiet concern. Whatever happens tonight, Mira had said, remember who you were before him. Elira had not understood then. She was beginning to understand now. Theron stood across the clearing, but he had not looked at her once. His copper hair gleamed beneath the moon, his posture elegant, and his smile easy. But his eyes kept drifting to where Revena stood among the noble ladies, a vision in blood-red silk. One by one, pairs stepped forward to declare their bonds. Wolves emerged from human forms, circling their chosen mates, sealing promises with ancient howls that echoed through the trees. Then the Elder Keeper's voice rose above the whispers. Prince Theron of House Valdros, second son of the throne, step forward and declare your claim. Illyra's lungs constricted. This was it. After 8 years of waiting, hoping, believing in crumbs scattered across an endless table, this was the moment everything would change. She stepped toward the circle. The crowd parted, eyes tracking her movement with expressions ranging from curiosity to open disdain. She heard the whispers slithering through the assembly like serpents. The Beast Speaker. She actually believes he will choose her. Illyra lifted her chin and kept walking. Theron watched her approach. Something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain before it vanished beneath a careful mask. Prince Theron, the Elder Keeper repeated. Do you claim this woman as your bonded mate beneath the light of the sacred moon? Silence stretched across the grove. Theron opened his mouth, closed it. Illyra felt the ground begin to tilt beneath her feet. Theron's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, his gaze dropping to the earth. I withdraw my claim. The words fell like executioner's blades. Illyra could not move, could not breathe. The world had narrowed to a single point of white-hot agony centered in her chest. The circumstances have changed, Theron continued, his voice strengthening as though he had rehearsed this speech. I must consider what is best for the kingdom, for our alliances. I cannot bond with someone who carries complications. Complications. 23 years of being called cursed, broken, unnatural. And now she was simply a complication. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Soft at first, then louder. Illyra saw Odessa's triumphant smile, Revena's satisfied smirk, and dozens of faces gleaming with cruel delight. Her legs refused to carry her away. She was frozen, exposed, stripped bare before every person who had ever whispered that she was worthless. And then she heard it. A sound that silenced every voice in the grove. A growl. Low, deep, and ancient. It rumbled through the earth itself, vibrating in Illyra's bones, commanding attention with primal authority. Every head turned toward the edge of the clearing, where King Sorin's wolf had emerged from the shadows. The wolf was massive. Black as starless night, with eyes that glowed like molten silver, it stood taller than any beast Illyra had ever seen. Power radiated from its form in waves that made the torches flicker and the assembled nobles shrink back in instinctive terror. Sorin's wolf, the king's bonded beast, which had not shown itself publicly in over a decade. And it was walking toward her. The crowd scrambled apart, creating a path that the wolf ignored entirely. It moved with deliberate, measured steps, its luminous gaze fixed on Illyra with an intensity that emptied her lungs of air. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but her feet remained rooted to the sacred ground. The wolf stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its midnight fur, close enough that its breath stirred the loose strands of hair framing her face. Then, slowly, impossibly, the great beast lowered itself. It bowed. The Alpha King's wolf bowed before her. Gasps erupted through the grove. Somewhere, a woman screamed. The Elder Keeper dropped his ceremonial staff, his ancient face drained of all color. Impossible, someone breathed. But Illyra was no longer listening to the crowd. She was listening to the wolf. Its thoughts pressed against her mind, not in words exactly, but in impressions older than language. Waited. Long. Yours. Mine. Ours. Finally. Tears burned her eyes. A ripple of shadow moved at the edge of her vision, and then Sorin was there, human again, though how he had shifted so quickly she could not fathom. He wore only loose trousers, his chest bare, his skin gleaming with the exertion of transformation. He was magnificent. My wolf has chosen, Sorin announced, his voice carrying across the stunned assembly. What he chooses, I honor. He turned to face the crowd, his shoulders squared, his presence commanding absolute attention. Illyra of the Grey Tower is no longer unclaimed. She is mine. My wolf has recognized her as his true mate, and I will not deny what the ancient blood demands. Chaos erupted. Elders shouted protests. Nobles demanded explanations. Theron stood frozen, his face ashen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. But Soren ignored them all. He extended his hand toward Illyra, palm up, fingers open, an offering, not a command. "You have a choice," he said quietly so only she could hear. "You always have a choice. But know that if you take my hand, I will protect you with everything I am." Illyra stared at his hand through the blur of her tears. Minutes ago, she had been destroyed, humiliated beyond recovery, ready to shatter into pieces that could never be reassembled. Now a king was offering her salvation. More than that, his wolf had claimed her, had bowed to her in front of everyone who had ever called her worthless. She did not understand why, did not know what any of it meant. But when her hand found his, something ignited in her chest, a spark of warmth that raced through her veins, settling somewhere deep and permanent. Soren's fingers closed around hers, and the world shifted on its axis. "Come," he murmured. "You do not need to remain here." He led her out of the grove, past the gaping crowds and the sputtering elders, past Theron's devastated face and Revena's murderous glare. Illyra did not look back. She was too busy trying to understand the wildfire burning where Soren's skin touched hers. The Queen's chambers had not been occupied in over a decade. Illyra stood in the center of the vast room, turning slowly, trying to absorb the reality of her surroundings. Velvet curtains in deep emerald-framed windows that overlooked the kingdom. A fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with warmth. The bed, draped in silver and black silks, could have held 6 people comfortably. "This is too much," she whispered. "It is yours now." Soren stood near the doorway, maintaining a careful distance. "Everything in this room belongs to the king's mate. It has waited empty since my mother passed." His mother. The previous queen, who had died when Soren was barely 16, forcing a boy to become a king overnight. "I do not understand any of this." Illyra turned to face him. "Your wolf, the bowing. What happened in that grove? Why?" Soren was quiet for a long moment. "My wolf has watched you for years," he finally said. "Every time you crossed the training grounds, every time you refused to break despite everything they threw at you." He paused, something vulnerable flickering beneath his composure. "He recognized something in you long before I allowed myself to see it." "Recognized what?" "His mate." The word hung between them like a living thing. "That is impossible," Illyra breathed. "I am not even a shifter. I cannot bond with a wolf the way your people do." "And yet my wolf bowed to you." Soren took a single step closer. In 300 years of recorded history, a king's wolf has never bowed to anyone, not to conquerors, not to emperors, not to the most powerful alphas in the realm. Another step. "He bowed to you, Illyra. Whatever you are, whatever power sleeps inside you, my wolf knows its worth even if you do not." Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the chamber. Soren's expression hardened. "Enter." The door swung open to reveal Counselor Varen, a thin man with a face like a starving hawk. Behind him stood several elders, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. "Your Majesty," Varen began, his tone carefully neutral. "The council demands an audience." The ceremony was disrupted. Ancient protocols were violated. There are those who question whether this claim holds any legitimacy. Soren moved so quickly Illyra barely tracked it. One moment he stood beside her. The next, he was inches from Varen, his presence radiating danger. "My wolf chose her," the king said softly. Questioning her legitimacy would be questioning him. Would you like to explain to my wolf why his judgment is insufficient? Varen paled. No, your majesty. Then the council will wait until I summon them. Soren stepped back. Spread the word. Illyra is under my protection. Any disrespect toward her will be treated as treason against the crown. The counselor bowed stiffly and retreated, the elders scurrying after him like frightened mice. When the door closed, Soren released a breath that sounded almost weary. They will not accept this easily, Illyra said quietly. No. He turned to face her, and the hardness in his expression softened. But I have never required their acceptance, only their obedience. Something warm unfurled in Illyra's chest. Why did you do this? She asked. The truth. Not politics, not duty. Soren studied her for a long moment. The firelight carved shadows across his face. Because when I saw you standing there, destroyed by my brother's cowardice, something inside me refused to allow it. His voice dropped lower. Because my wolf has claimed you, and I am tired of fighting what he has known for years. Illyra stepped toward him without thinking. And what has he known? Soren's hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. That you were always meant to be ours. The fire crackled, the silence stretched, and Illyra, who had spent her entire life being unwanted, felt something deep and powerful stir in the depths of her soul. Theron found her the next morning. Illyra was walking through the Queen's Garden, a private sanctuary accessible only from her new chambers, when his voice cut through the morning mist. So this is where you hide now. She turned to find the prince standing at the garden's entrance, his handsome face ravaged by sleeplessness. Dark circles hollowed his eyes, and there was a wildness to his expression she had never seen before. You should not be here, Illyra said carefully. Should not be here? Theron laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. 3 days ago, you were supposed to be mine. Now you are sleeping in my brother's chambers, wearing his colors, accepting his protection. He stepped closer, his hands clenching at his sides. How quickly you moved on. You abandoned me. Illyra's voice remained steady, though her chest ached. In front of everyone. You called me a complication. I was going to fix it. Theron's voice cracked. I just needed more time. Time for what? To decide whether Revena's beauty outweighed 8 years of my loyalty? The words landed like blows. Theron flinched. It was not like that. Then what was it like? Illyra stepped toward him, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. Tell me, Theron. Explain how a man who whispered promises in my ear for nearly a decade could not find the courage to keep a single one. Silence hung between them. I loved you, Theron finally said. In my way. Your way. Illyra shook her head slowly. Your way was taking everything I offered and giving nothing in return. Your way was keeping me waiting like a dog for scraps while you sampled every other dish at the table. And my brother? Theron's voice hardened. You think he is different? You think the cold king who has never shown interest in anyone suddenly cares about you? His wolf chose me. His wolf. Theron spat the words. A convenient excuse. Soren has always wanted what I had. The attention, the charm, the ease. He finally found something of mine he could take. I was never yours to take. The words silenced him. Illyra drew a breath, steadying herself. I spent 8 years believing I was not enough. Believing that if I just waited longer, tried harder, loved deeper, you would finally see me. She met his eyes without flinching. But the truth is, you saw me perfectly. You simply did not care. Theron's face crumbled. For one moment, one brief moment, Illyra felt the ghost of the girl who had loved him stir in her chest. But the ghost was fading, replaced by something stronger. Leave, Theron. Her voice held no anger now, only exhaustion. There is nothing left for you here. The prince stared at her as though seeing a stranger. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Elira watched him disappear into the mist, waiting for the grief to come. It did not. Instead, there was only a strange lightness, as though chains she had not known she carried had finally fallen away. A presence stirred behind her. She turned to find Soren standing at the edge of the garden, his expression unreadable. "How much did you hear?" she asked. "Enough." He walked toward her, stopping close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You did not need me to intervene," he said quietly. "You handled him yourself. Was that a test?" "No." Something flickered in his gray eyes. "It was a revelation. You are stronger than you know, Elira. Stronger than anyone has allowed you to believe." She looked up at him, this king who had upended her entire world. "What happens now?" Soren's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. "Now we discover what you truly are." The dreams began 3 nights later. Elira found herself running through forests that existed only in moonlight, her body low to the ground, her senses exploding with information she could not process. She smelled every creature for miles, heard heartbeats beneath the earth, felt the pulse of the land itself thrumming through her veins. And beside her, always beside her, ran a massive black wolf with eyes like molten silver. She woke gasping, her skin burning, her blood singing with a power she had never known. "It is happening." Soren's voice came from the darkness. Elira sat up to find him in the doorway connecting their chambers, his expression tight with concern. "What is happening to me?" He crossed to her bedside, kneeling so their eyes were level. "Your gift," he said carefully. "Speaking to beasts. It was never a curse, Elira. It was a seed waiting to bloom." "I do not understand." "There are legends." Soren's hand found hers, anchoring her. "Old stories about humans who could commune with all creatures because they carried the blood of the first pack. The original wolves who walked alongside gods before the world was young." Elira shook her head. "That is mythology. Children's tales." "So was the king's wolf bowing?" His eyes held hers. "Yet it happened." A wave of heat crashed through her body, forcing a gasp from her lips. Her bones ached. Her skin felt too tight. Every nerve ending screamed with sensation. "Soren," she panted. "Something is wrong." "Nothing is wrong." He gathered her into his arms, holding her against his chest. "Your wolf is waking. After 23 years of sleeping, she is finally ready to emerge." "I cannot have a wolf. I am not a shifter." "You are something older." His voice was steady, certain, something the world has not seen in centuries, and she has waited long enough. The pain intensified. Elira cried out as her body began to reshape itself, muscles tearing and reforming, bones cracking and realigning. She had witnessed shifts before, but nothing prepared her for experiencing it. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Elira opened her eyes. The world had transformed. Colors were sharper. Sounds were layered with meaning. And when she looked down, she saw paws where hands should be. White fur, pure as fresh snow, covered her entire body. She had shifted. She was a wolf. Wonder flooded through her, followed immediately by the presence of another consciousness. Her wolf. Ancient. Patient. Finally awake. Waited, the wolf whispered in her mind. Long wait. Now free. Elira lifted her head and found Soren watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face. Awe. "White," he breathed. "A white wolf. There has not been one since—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Do you know what this means?" Before she could answer, she heard them. Voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They came from everywhere. From the kennels below. From the stables. from the forest beyond the castle walls. Every beast within miles was suddenly speaking to her, their thoughts flooding her consciousness in a torrent of recognition. Alpha, queen, mother, leader. They knew her. They had always known her. And they were answering her call. Soren moved to the window, his face illuminated by moonlight. "Illyra," he said slowly, "you need to see this." She padded to his side on unsteady legs, still adjusting to her new form. Below, the castle grounds were filled with animals, wolves and hounds, hawks and ravens, foxes and deer. Predator beside prey, standing in impossible harmony, all facing the queen's tower, all facing her. "The first blood," Soren murmured. "The legends were true. You are not just a beast speaker, Illyra. You are their queen." Illyra felt her wolf rise within her, powerful and certain. And for the first time in her life, she understood exactly what she was. The great hall had never held so many. Nobles packed the galleries, warriors lined the walls, elders clustered near the throne, their faces tight with anticipation. Word had spread through the kingdom like wildfire. The beast speaker had awakened something ancient. The council had demanded a demonstration. Illyra stood at the center of the hall, Soren beside her. She wore white now, the color of her wolf, and silver bands encircled her arms in patterns that matched the runes carved into the ceremonial stones. She was terrified, but she would not show it. "The council questions your claim," Counselor Varen announced, his hawk-like face twisted with barely concealed hostility. "They demand proof of these supposed abilities." "Then they shall have it," Soren replied. He turned to Illyra, and his expression softened into something private, something meant only for her. "Show them," he murmured. "Show them who you are." Illyra closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, past the stone walls, past the courtyards, into the wild lands beyond. She felt them waiting. Thousands of creatures who had heard her call days ago and had been gathering ever since. "Come," she told them. "Come and be seen." The great doors of the hall burst open. They poured in like a living tide. Wolves of every color, their eyes gleaming with intelligence. Hawks swooping through the rafters. Foxes and badgers padding between the legs of screaming nobles. A massive stag with antlers like cathedral spires walked directly to Illyra's side and bowed its great head. The assembly dissolved into chaos, but Illyra was not finished. She shifted. The transformation was smooth now, natural as breathing. One moment she was human. The next, her white wolf stood in the center of the hall, larger than any female wolf had right to be, radiating power that made even the bravest warriors step back. The animals fell silent. Then, as one, they lowered themselves. Every beast in the hall bowed to her. The elder keeper, the same man who had witnessed Soren's wolf bow days earlier, fell to his knees. "First blood," he whispered, tears streaming down his weathered face. "The prophecies were true. The Queen of Beasts has returned." One by one the nobles followed, the warriors, the counselors. Even Counselor Varen, his face pale with shock, bent his knee. Illyra shifted back, breathing hard, and found Soren watching her with an expression that made her chest tighten. Pride, devotion, love. He crossed to her and took her hand, raising it high for all to see. "My mate," he announced, his voice ringing through the hall. "Your queen. Does anyone still question her place?" Silence. Then, from the back of the hall, a slow clap began. Others joined. The applause swelled, filling the space with thunder. Illyra's eyes swept the crowd and found Theron standing near the doors. Revena was nowhere to be seen, likely fled back to the Ashlands with her schemes in ruins. The prince looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in his face now. Only a grief so profound it almost made her pity him. Almost. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing through the doors without looking back. Elira watched him go and felt nothing but peace. Soren's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly, for her ears alone. Elira looked up at the man who had chosen her. Who had seen her when no one else had? Whose wolf had known her worth before she herself understood it? "Whole," she said. "For the first time in my life, I feel whole." Soren smiled, rare and genuine, and pressed his forehead to hers. "Good," he murmured, "because this is only the beginning." Around them, the beasts lifted their voices in a chorus of howls and calls, celebrating their queen. And Elira, the girl they had once called cursed, finally understood the truth. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting to become